तू थोड़ा gay है यार. This was not the first time when my friends had approached me with a decided opinion on my sexual orientation. However, the difference between this instance and the previous instances was that while I would say, "Hey, ye kya hota hai?" and not care much about it earlier, this time I said, "Are ye hota kya hai? Samjhao mujhe." So they explained to me, and I understood that their expert judgment was based on my words and my gestures, things that are innate about me, things that define me, but things that had not concerned me earlier. My natural reaction was born out of peer pressure. I did not want to be a freak. It was imperative that I fit in among the men folk. It was important that I belonged. So I started trying to do things that are perceived to be manly. I started listening to rap music and hard rock. And while I started lifting weights to develop biceps and be a part of masculine conversations, I stopped lifting my hands in gestures that used to define me. But when someone came up to me and told me that I need to stop smiling too much to become cooler still, I understood that this chain was never going to end. I loved smiling. Who doesn't? I loved being a nerd more than chasing these elusive standards of masculinity. In fact, pretending to be a dude bro brought me no peace. And if this was what straightness implied, I wanted out. So I began to introspect again. I had earlier assumed that I knew every single thing about my sexual identity. But what if I was wrong? Maybe my friends had it straight all along. So I started researching about the LGBTQ community, started reading articles, watching videos of coming out stories, anything that would lead me to conclude that I was gay after all. And in the process, I understood and realized that the LGBTQ community is much more open and accepting than our traditional backgrounds. In fact, if I was a part of this community, I could dislike loud music and obnoxious language and still be a part of the larger group. So this was the first time when I was letting go of the barriers that had earlier caged my identity. I was choosing happiness over conforming to existing norms. However, I failed to see the absence of real reflection in my questioning process. The LGBTQ community had not judged me, and so I thought that I am a part of the community. But my journey of self discovery kept spiraling on. At a program that studied gender, caste, and sexuality through the performing arts, I came across the term toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity refers to the set of traditional or cultural norms pertaining to masculinity and its role in society, these norms being harmful for men, women, the society overall. And so I realized that building biceps is just one way of saying that men need to be seen as physically strong. You see, this notion has passed on from generation to generation, and dumbbell by dumbbell, these men have laid the foundations for a hypermasculine world. So saying that anyone who does not conform to the image of a macho man is gay is a poor attempt at saying that my masculinity needs to be your masculinity too. However, every individual has a different definition of masculinity. And so I realized that I am not homosexual, but neither am I the typical dude bro. I'm heterosexual, which means being straight, and at the same time, my gender is an intricate blend of perceived masculine and feminine traits, and there is no shame in that. So at the end of the journey, I realized that this entire reinforcement of the set masculine norms was not just inconsiderate commenting on the part of my peers, not just, but it was also a function of social constructions that have been formed in and by our society. These ideas were formed in our past, but we make them sustainable by using them in our daily interactions. You know the characteristic, मैं तो बस मजाक कर रहा था यार, इतना बुरा क्या लग गया तुझे? But the question that needs to be asked is this mazak costing us something? And the answer, according to me, is a big yes, because we are developing meanings in coordination with others rather than being individualistic, rather than forming our own opinions. And it follows that these labels, through which we limit the personalities of our peers down to small words, labels are not limited to just gender and sexuality. Labels are pervasive. ranging from a person's physical features to a person's innate beliefs. And as our economic engines and our thinking has evolved, so have our labels. They've sort of progressed from words such as dumb and silly to words such as feminazi. And the, these labels come up because of the limited scope of discussion on social media. So in earlier times, where our primary interactions were through the spoken word, our labels would come up based on people's physical features and their manner of speaking, and subsequently the labels were such as dumb, silly, chota mota, you know, all that stuff, and stammering and fluent. But in today's day and age, when our primary interactions are through social media, we see people on the basis of their representations of themselves on media, such as Instagram. And so our labels are so indirect. And I think that this is what culminates into the prevalence of labels such as feminazi. Feminazi is a play on the words feminist and Nazi because of the glaring similarities that the people who use this term see in the ideals of feminism and Nazism. These perceived similarities can be the extent of censorship or the double standards that are involved, etc. So, feminism, which is the advocacy of women's rights on the grounds of the equality of the sexes, has become a problematic label today because of its perceived synonymity with feminazism. Additionally, as a result of a large number of cases where women have been known to have cried wolf, true cases of abused women are also liable to be taken with a pinch of salt. Political correctness. I believe that the entire concept of political correctness exists on social media because of this. Not only are people subject to incompletely representative tags, but they are also unable to explain their opinions. They're unable to discuss why they believe in what they believe in. And while one person's political correctness seems to be another person's symbol of progress, one always feels the need to limit the extent to which they can publicize their opinion. But these are still the more openly visible harmful effects of labels. There are many more underlying effects as well. For one, whenever someone is tagged or labeled, there is a false distinction that is created between either belonging to one type or being a person that is completely different from this type. But amidst all the contexts and complications, this almost always leads to inaccurate conclusions. For example, let's say you're discussing with your friend about films, and you bring up a movie such as Masan, let's say. Masan is a sort of a Nazi film, and you're talking about how you loved it, but your friend doesn't like such films, and he says, oh, you're so boring, mate. But what does this statement imply? The statement implies that your friend would not relate with most of the things that you find interesting. But that's obviously not the case. Both of you obviously love Chak De India, both of you hate calculus, and both of you think that, to be honest, Coldplay's quality is going down a bit. So the thing is that categorizing people into different types and then finding the differences between these types is a huge barrier for our combined and personal growth. And this entire culture of saying that one type always has to be above another type, always has to be better, the hierarchy that has to be maintained, is inherently poor because it leads to us internally labeling ourselves. The essence of the idea, which is that someone is always better, makes you label yourself as a certain normative being because you think that what you like should resonate with what everyone else wants you to like. And as a result, increased self-awareness also becomes a problem because of these labels. For example, there was a stage in my own journey of self-discovery when my increased self-awareness about my gestures and my words made me consider the possibility that I am also gay. So if everything was so simple and sophisticated, everything categorized and arranged to the dot, how would we discover, create, and evolve? It has to be complicated. And it is okay to be complicated with all those layers and those textures. Because these layers and textures are what chiefly constitute our personalities. And what are people without that characteristic jerk of the head, those sweeping hand gestures, that relentless pacing, those egregious typos, or that whatever, man? To be different is to be human, and to be human is the only label we all unanimously belong under. Imagine living in a world where one is forced to classify colors under the banners of black and white. Yellow and red and pale orange and vivid violet are all colors, and they need to be there. How else would we have a rainbow? Thank you. Okay.